With us now, columnist Kirsty Strickland, the public relations specialist and former Conservative MP Peter Duncan, and STV's Westminster correspondent Catherine Sampson. Hello all panel. Let's start with COVID. And Peter, it looks like we're going to see more restrictions this week. Can the First Minister take the public with her?
Well, I think any analysis of how she has performed over the last 6 months would lead you to believe that she has a great power of persuasion and she has got the ability to persuade the public. I think some things are changing, though. I think there is a greater concern for the economy that is starting to grow in the public at large. I think an understanding of the unemployment consequences of a shutdown of whatever duration, and I think also there's perhaps a greater understanding of the pandemic than there was as we went into the last upsurge in cases. I think people understand that there is inevitably going to be some risk, and perhaps the blunt instruments are perhaps not the ones that we best deploy all the time or we reach for all the time.
Kirsty, will people keep to the rules, or do you think people are going to be concerned about the economy, as Peter said there?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a general sense of fatigue at the moment, and people are struggling, you know, not only financially but emotionally as well. And I don't know whether, because this circuit breaker that's being proposed is time limited, I don't know whether that might work to the Scottish Government's advantage, you know, to say maybe not so much one final push, but if they set out the reasons why it's necessary and explain behind it, and importantly get the opposition on side as well, I think people might be able to get on board with that, knowing that it's going to come to an end at some point. And this is, like Jason Leach said, it's a short, sharp shock just to get that R number down.
Yeah, so clarity is going to be really important, is it? And Catherine, Scotland's seeing the same rise in infections as England, I suppose, but Nicola Sturgeon seems to be taking the public with her, and perhaps in a way that Boris Johnson down south isn't. He seems to be struggling more.
I think this is something that's been remarked upon throughout the pandemic. You know, the outcomes in Scotland and England haven't been that dissimilar. Sometimes the decisions are broadly similar as well, albeit announced a few days apart. But yeah, there is this perception of Nicola Sturgeon. You know, she's been a constant, hasn't she? She takes her own press conferences every day. The Downing Street briefings were quite often a revolving door of ministers. And then when Boris Johnson has appeared, especially more recently, he sometimes seems confused by his own rules. There were gaffes last week. And, you know, I sat down with the Prime Minister for an interview on Friday. And one thing I did note was I think he's also more internally conflicted about what he's asking people to do. He is by nature more of a libertarian, describing his own rules as, you know, bossy, intrusive. And it goes to Peter's point there about that balance.
Moving on to the Tory Conference now, but not as we know it. It's all virtual, of course. Scottish leader Douglas Ross addressed a fringe meeting at the weekend and warned the case for separatism is being made more effectively in London than Edinburgh. Peter, what did you make of that?
Well, had this been a normal conference, I think this would have probably been one of the major contributions of the week. It was a very substantial contribution. I think it would have caused some ripples. And, you know, conferences normally where you meet people in the corridors and there's a buzz develops around a speech. And I think that would have been a speech that would have created just that edge of controversy, I think, pointing to the need, a greater need for the UK party to have that emotional connection to Scotland and to start to express that. But I think, you know, he was bold in his speech, and had that been a real live conference and not a sterile environment, it's impossible to create an emotional connection. However good the other three people in the panel with me today are at doing that emotional connection, it's impossible to do it unless you're in the room in one place.
Catherine, what did you make of his comments?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a very bold speech by Douglas Ross. I totally take on board this point of you can't get the same impression with conference. I mean, normally at this point, if I was at Tory Conference, I'd be waiting to go to the karaoke instead of thinking about my teapot and my pyjamas. I mean, you know, it's just not the same world, is it? But yeah, it was bold from Douglas Ross, and it was a wake-up call, I think, for the party. They have been frustrated, the Scottish Conservatives, with this idea of getting thrown token lines in speeches. The Chancellor today, one line about the union. And I think it's a message saying, you know, this isn't going to cut it.
Catherine, I'm sure you're a karaoke queen. But Kirsty, what sort of impression do you think Douglas Ross has made during his first few months as leader?
I think this speech certainly punchy, and like the others have said, if it had been in the traditional way, I think it perhaps would have got more coverage. I mean, the side swipes at Boris Johnson, I was very surprised about. I wasn't expecting that from Douglas Ross. You know, this idea that Boris Johnson at times acts as though he's a Prime Minister of England and not a Prime Minister of the UK. So I agree with that argument. I didn't necessarily agree with his conclusion that somehow love bombing Scotland or paying more attention to Scotland is going to reverse the trend we see in the polls right now, where yes is polling a consistent majority. I think that a lot of that is down to the fact that you've got a UK government, a cabinet stuffed full of, you know, incompetent, mediocre people who have been promoted well beyond their abilities. And I don't think we should be surprised that the majority of people in Scotland are now looking at that and saying, is this the best we can do?
Peter, Boris Johnson will be speaking tomorrow. What does he need to do?
Well, what he needs to do, I suppose, is create an impression. And I think a sterile environment is absolutely the last possible thing that he would want for this speech. I mean, we're starting to see ripples across the Conservative Party, across the UK, of questioning over the strategy, questioning of the continual imposition of restrictions when there doesn't seem to be any great evidence that those restrictions are having any great success at turning round the tide on a potential second wave. So that in real life, in a normal time, this would be a conference where a lot of the buzz in the hall would have been quite questioning of government strategy. As it happens, it's going to be a sterile speech. I suspect it will be all about, we said we would do this, and we're going to get back onto the plan again. But how powerfully that's going to be received when it's just down a television lens, I'm not sure.
OK, we'll have to wait and see. Now, as things stand, disgraced MP Margaret Ferrier has been suspended as an SNP MP, but is still holding on to her seat in the Commons. Catherine, do you think she'll hang on?
I mean, she wouldn't be the first MP to just try and hang on through a scandal. She probably won't be the last. It has been hugely damaging, though. I mean, I think this time last week, outside of her constituency, many people wouldn't have heard of Margaret Ferrier. Today, the First Minister made a slip of the tongue, called her Margaret COVID, like Typhoid Mary or something like that. You know, such is the kind of association now with this incident and her reputation. If she does decide, though, she's not going anywhere, there is another course of action. If the Commons Standards Committee decides to suspend her for 10 days or more, it could trigger a recall petition. If 10% of her constituents sign up to that, she could potentially be ousted. That is not a quick process, but it has been done.
Peter, do you think she can withstand the pressure? I mean, she must be under a tremendous amount of pressure at the moment, and she has COVID.
Yes, indeed, and I hope on a personal basis that there's people in our party who are looking out for her, because she'll be in I suspect, a pretty dark place right now, and deserves some support. Having said that, what she did was unbelievably irresponsible. And I just have this vision of her going on to the King's Cross station or Euston station and deciding which coach to get on. You know, she knew she was infectious, and yet she walked down the platform and thought, will I get into that coach or the next? I mean, unbelievable. I think she'll try and hold on. I suspect recall will inevitably come into play, but that's going to take, I suspect, a couple of years to play out. And in the meantime, I think she'll keep banking that salary.
And Kirsty, do you think she can ride it out? Do you think she might think if she just keeps her head down, this will all die out?
I don't think it will do, purely because of the anger this has provoked, not only in opposition parties, but her own party. You know, I can't remember the last time I've seen such strong condemnation from an MP, from members of their own party. What she did was so reckless and selfish and stupid. So I can't see her riding this out in any kind of way. I think her career ended the moment she took the decision to get on public transport, knowing that she was infected with coronavirus. Whether or not, you know, it takes a while for her to formalise that and announce her resignation, we'll have to wait and see.
And Catherine, if there is a by-election, do you think Labour might fancy their chances?
Yeah, I think Labour certainly sense an opportunity here. You know, just this afternoon, something dropped into my inbox from Keir Starmer's team. He does these Q&As around the country in places he thinks that Labour can win back. And funnily enough, there is going to be a call Keir, as they're called, in Rutherglen on Wednesday. Now, that might just be political trolling, possible, but I think also they are sort of sizing up their options there.
OK, absolutely. Catherine, Peter and Peter, Kirsty, thank you.